Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Chartered Institute of Directors 2025 Fellows Luncheon. I'd like to start with recognitions as I duly recognize the President and Chairman of Council, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, LLM, FCIOD. Also here with us is the first Vice President, Mr. Adetunji Oyebanji, FCIOD. Do allow me to recognize next the Director General and CEO of the CIoD. Please make welcome Mr. Dele Alimi, FCIOD. We have amongst us some past presidents of the Chartered Institute of Directors, and I would like to start by recognizing, in no particular order, Architect Thomas Awagu, Distinguished Fellow, CIoD. I'm a bit unsure, but I think the applause that we are giving this day is a bit lean, and I would like us to please acknowledge when we announce. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also here is another past president, Alhaji Ahmed Rufai Mohammed, Distinguished Fellow, CIoD. Alhaji also happens to be our host today. He plays a very critical role. We thank you very much for hosting us. And of course, you are sitting right next to our chief host, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo. In the house is another past president, Chief Chris Okunowo, DF CIOD. We thank you all. We'll be having the recognitions as we go. If we have anyone who comes in after this, we will continue the recognitions. So do allow me to invite the Chairman, Fellows and Awards Committee, who are earlier described as our hosts for this event. With a resounding round of applause, please welcome Alhaji Ahmed Rufai Mohammed, DF CIOD. And I think you should keep clapping until he gets up stage. This way, sir.
I'm Chairman of the Governing Council, Chartered Institute of Directors, Tijani Borodo, FCIOD, LLM. Our guest speaker, Mr. CIoD Fellow, FCIOD, Chairman Greenwich Merchant Bank, members of the Governing Council here present, distinguished past presidents here present, distinguished fellows of the Institute, our sponsors and partners, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2025 Fellows Luncheon of our great Institute. I feel honored and stand before such a distinguished gathering of our esteemed fellows, who I dare say represent the very heart and soul of corporate governance in this country. Our Institute is very pleased to organize the 2025 Annual Luncheon for our fellows, as has been the annual tradition for many years. In this regard, I wish to thank our President and Chairman of our Council, Alhaji Borodo, and members of the Governing Council for the privilege to hold this year's event, as well as for honoring us with their presence here. As many of you are aware, the purpose of the Fellows Luncheon is primarily to bring our fellows together for an engaging afternoon to enable them network and interact with one another, as well as listen to a distinguished and professional member of our society to speak to us on a contemporary topic that our fellows will find not only useful, but capable of stimulating thoughtful discussions and even policy making in their corporate boards. The luncheon also gives us the opportunity to acknowledge and express our appreciation to all our fellows for their exceptional contributions to their corporate boards and for the successes of their organizations. Their expertise, commitment, and dedication to the observance of good corporate governance in your organizations serve to sustain their achievements, which resonate positively within the ambit of the Nigerian business community as a whole. As fellows of our institute, you embody the very principles that our institute advocates and champions. And your dedication to the observance of these principles is so critical in shaping the ethical and business leadership of your corporate organizations. The expectation of our institute is therefore for you to serve both as pillars and beacons of our institute and all that it embodies in its charter. In this year's annual luncheon, I'm pleased to introduce to you our guest speaker, Mr. CIoD Fellow Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, and Chairman, Greenwich Merchant Bank Limited. We welcome you warmly, Mr. Falomo, and express our gratitude. And we deeply appreciate your honoring our invitation to address us on the theme, Multigenerational Leadership, bridging the gap for a stronger board, which topic speaks directly to one of the contemporary challenges facing corporate boards locally and abroad. The modern boardroom increasingly brings together individuals from different generations, each having unique experiences, skills, and perspectives. Therefore, for corporate boards to truly succeed, they must actively cultivate an environment where these diverse generational viewpoints are not only heard, but also integrated to forge a more potent and effective leadership of our corporate organizations. I'm confident that Mr. Follow, who is a renowned stockbroker and banker with decades of boardroom experience, will shed a lot of light on today's chosen theme. His distinguished career is a testament to the principles our institute holds dear, and we assure him that we are eager to hear his thoughtful knowledge on this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, this luncheon continually gives us all the opportunity to bond together and strengthen our community connections, exchange ideas, and depart with a new sense of purpose in building boards that are not only effective today, but also resilient and prepared for the challenges of the future. Distinguished fellows, this welcome address will be incomplete without recognizing and appreciating the immense work of the erstwhile Fellows and Awards Committee, from whom our newly inaugurated committee took over in April this year. In fact, this event was organized by the former committee, and we are very happy to have delivered it so successfully. On behalf of the new committee, as my colleagues, I want to thank the former chairman, Mr. Awagu, Actor Awagu, and his team for their splendid work, which we have hoped to build upon and excel by the grace of Almighty. Kindly give, we want to applaud the committee. Thank you, sir. I also thank the new members of the Fellows and Awards Committee for effectively carrying along the baton, and Secretariat staff for working assiduously in ensuring the success of today's event. Once again, I want to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Fallow, for accepting our invitation, and the President and Chairman of our Council, Ajay Barodo, for his support always. To our distinguished fellows, we thank you all for your presence and commitment to the Institute at all times. So I wish you to enjoy the lecture and the luncheon. Thank you very much.
Can we please give our hosts another round of applause, please? I did mention that we will take recognitions as we proceed. And one of the names on my list is actually the name of our guest speaker, the chairman, Greenwich Merchant Bank Limited. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Directors. But I then said to myself, who am I to introduce him? I'll leave that to our host, and he has done such a fantastic job. I'd like to also recognize you and welcome you here, sir. I am not putting you under pressure, sir, but a lot of people here are waiting for that, your speech, your presentation. I've been told when I got here, do you know if he's coming? Do you know if he's coming? So they are actually waiting to listen to your presentation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, having heard from the hosts, I think it is only proper that I invite the chief host. But before I do that, I would like to mention that our guest speaker did not come here alone. As we all know, he's the chairman. But we also have someone who accompanied him here. And she is the head corporate communications of Greenwich Holdings Limited. Please welcome Ozena Utulu. Having done that, it is now time for me to invite our chief hosts, our president and chairman, governing council of the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria. Please, with a resounding round of applause, welcome Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, LLM, FCIOD. And I expect the applause to be even louder than that.
Distinguished guest speaker, Mr. CIoD, Fellow, FCIOD, KO. Our distinguished host and chairman of Fellows Awards Committee, Alhaji Ahmed Rufai Mohammed, DF CIoD. Our distinguished past president here, Akilet Awagu and Chief Okuno. Members of the governing council here present, fellows, and members of CIoD and their valued guests, our very supportive sponsors and partners, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Esteemed fellows and distinguished guests, it is with great honor and sincere pleasure that I welcome you all to this year's edition of our Fellows Luncheon. Welcome, ma'am, our distinguished fellow, elder, our past minister, Dr. Mrs. Nike Akande. Welcome, ma'am. This gathering is more than a ceremonial luncheon. It is a distinguished coverage of leaders and visionaries and change makers. It represents a unique and vital opportunity to reflect, connect, and affirm our shared commitments to leadership excellence and governance. This Fellows Luncheon holds a special place in the calendar of our institute. It is not just a moment to reconnect and celebrate our achievements, but a time to explore the evolving dynamics of leadership and to collectively chart a course forward. As fellows, we carry the mantle of stewardship, and not only for the present, but for the generations of leaders yet to come. Permit me to begin by extending our heartfelt appreciation to our distinguished chairman and host, Alhaji Ahmed Rufai, the chairman of the Fellows and Awards Committee, and also by extension the former chairman, Akilet Awagu, whom he has recognized. They've done a lot of work which culminated in what is here. I thank you most sincerely and the members of your committee for the excellent job you have done. Thank you very much. It is also my great pleasure to welcome our guests, Mr. CIoD Fellow, FCIOD, a renowned investment banker and chairman of Greenwich Holding Company, Merchant Bank, and just the holding company of Greenwich. CIoD, we thank you most sincerely for being here with us. And of course, CIoD is at home. He's a fellow, has been associated with the institute for more than 25 years. So he's really, really at home. CIoD, we thank you for coming. We look forward to learning from your wealth of experience and inevitable insights you bring to the important discussions like this. As fellows of this prestigious institute, we shoulder a profound responsibility. We do not merely occupy seats on boards, we shape them. We do not simply inherit leadership, we cultivate it with purpose, passion, and vision. Today, we gather here under the theme Multigenerational Leadership, Bridging the Gap for a Stronger Board. This is not just a topic for discussion, it's a clarion call, a guiding philosophy, a strategic imperative for the future leadership in the rapidly transforming world. Leadership is no longer a static role. It is fluid, evolving with the tides of the economy, technology, and the societal changes. The boards and institutions we lead must reflect this reality with intention, foresight, and inclusiveness. We must recognize that true leadership cannot be confined to a single generation, ideology, or perspective. It is through the dynamic convergence of experience and innovation, wisdom and fresh ideas that we find resilience and relevance needed to thrive in today's business world. Every generation has its own values, its strengths. While we often speak of membership and knowledge transfer, now is the time for deliberate action. It is not enough to acknowledge the difference. We must. Let us build environments where legacy meets progress, where tradition inspires transformation. As fellows, we are uniquely positioned to be bridged between the past and the future. We understand the foundational principles of governance, yet we also appreciate the changing demands of the modern workforce and society. We must enhance our role as conduits of continuity and change, ensuring that as leadership style evolves, our core values of integrity, professionalism are intact. The power of multi-generational leadership lies not in isolation, but in collaboration. It is when seasoned leaders, mentors with humility, mid-career professionals, empower with clarity, and emerging leaders contribute with courage that will create boards and institutions that will strong as future-ready boards. Of course, we must acknowledge the challenges inherent in this process. Generational divides can create friction, misunderstanding, missed opportunity, but we must not allow these divides to become barriers. Instead, let us create frameworks for meaningful dialogue, shared learning, and mutual respect. A strong board does not simply celebrate diversity, it integrates. It sees experience not as a hierarchy, but as a foundation. It welcomes innovation not as a disruption, but as progress. Today, I urge each one of us to reflect. If you are an experienced leader, how are you nurturing the next generation without stifling their innovation? If you are a rising leader, how are you learning from the wisdom around you while offering bold new perspectives? Let this luncheon serve not as a moment of fellowship, but as a springboard for introspection, engagement, and commitment to the future. Leadership at its highest form is not only about personal legacy, it is also about collective progress. The CIoD is an institution committed to excellence in leadership. We all know that, that's why we're here. But excellence demands adaptability. It demands that we lead not just with authority, but with empathy, vision, and we must collaborate. Let us live today and not just inspire, but recharge with the assurance that as fellows and our guests, we are not simply participating in leadership, we are also the architects of the leadership of the future. I thank you for listening. Enjoy your lunch.
Can we please give our President and Chairman, Governing Council, another round of applause? Thank you very much. And of course, while he was giving his speech. We were joined, as mentioned, by the chairman and president, a two-time minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I did hear him say that she's a distinguished fellow as well. And when I got my brief, I was told to also add that she's an elder. And I said, elder? So I would like to welcome you, my elder and distinguished fellow of the Chartered Institute of Directors. Thank you very much. It is now time for that moment some of us have been waiting for. We have our guest speaker today who has been duly recognized, and he has a presentation. After that, we will be having an interactive session so that he wouldn't have spoken to himself. We'd like to learn from him and share experiences. So just to let you know that if you have any points of note while he makes his presentation, please note it down, and I'll be coming around with a microphone to have you make your points or contributions. So without further ado, please welcome the Chairman, Greenwich Merchant Bank Limited, our guest speaker today, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Directors. Please welcome Mr. CIoD Fallow.
You did mention that you are not going to put me under pressure. Let me confirm to you that you have already done so. But I think we'll manage one way or the other. It's my presentation right there now. I would like to adopt a presentation style where I will speak to the issues, and then, as you mentioned, you can take notes, and we will have an interactive session after. I think that will be the learning point for all of us. So, President and Chairman of Council, my dear brother, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, thank you very much for inviting me. I also want to thank the First Vice President, the Chairman, Fellows and Awards Committee, the Director General, and indeed the past presidents and members of the Governing Council of the CIoD. It's a pleasure to be here today. I must say that I really wish that I'd attended some of these interactive sessions much earlier, because from even listening to the speeches by Alhaji Rufai and Alhaji Borodo, I think I've missed some things in the past. I promise you that going forward, I will try to be more available. Today, we have spoken about the theme, and we had to sit down really to find an appropriate topic. And we ended up with what you have: strategies for multi-generational succession in boards. We are not going to sit here today and pretend that we will be able to find all the strategies that you will use to create multi-generational succession in your board. But all we'll be doing will be providing the framework, providing some information, and hopefully make some suggestions that you can use as strategies, and give you, an idea of how some other institutions have done this in the past. And hopefully we will all be able to take these lessons and apply them in our various boards. There's no doubt, I'm sure, in our minds, even from looking at the people on the first two tables here, I'm not going to say they are old people, but clearly there is need to have multi-generational succession, even from looking at some of the people who are in this. Alhaji Tijani, I'm not talking about you. Actor Tawagu, I'm certainly not referring to you. But I do know when we see that there are different other generations, the Gen Zs, the millennials, who may not be too well represented here, it also tells us the reason why we should have this conversation. So, very appropriate. And in doing so, we'll be looking at 5 basic things. I think you've moved a bit fast. And we'll be looking at 9 basic things, really. We'll do a background and introduction. We'll try and understand the generational landscape, and I think that's quite important when we get there. Then we'll talk about the hidden costs of ineffective transition from older generations to younger generations. There are some costs that you can clearly capture in terms of Naira and Kobo or USD or pound sterling, depending on the jurisdiction you belong to. But there are even hidden costs that would have long-lasting negative effects on your various companies. And then we'll talk about dynamic succession strategies, differentiating between what most boards are used to doing, including myself, and I'm sure some of us, and the dynamic strategies that we should all be adopting. We'll also try and propose an implementation roadmap and then talk to you about some tools and frameworks. Again, we'll look at some case studies. Unfortunately, these will be international case studies. Pardon me about that. We try to look for local case studies, but not too many were appropriate for this. But we'll look at those ones, and then we'll reach a conclusion about what we should be doing. So there is really an imperative for generational transition, and that imperative is stated on the screen. If you look at the first point, there says 50% of corporate boards are actually expected to turn over in the next decade. In other words, over the next 10 years, 50% of directors of the companies that you know today, and by the way, most of the references will be made have been to S&P 500. S&P 500, as you all know, are the top 500 companies in the Standard & Poor Index. They are global companies, but they're also companies that, you know, provide the best standards in terms of governance. They're different from a CIoD Fellows and Sons, for instance. But then there are a lot of lessons we can take from them. So 50% of those boards will turn over. Average board tenure will drop from 8.1 years to 7.7 years. Today, in most companies, you have 5 generations that are active in most companies. That is 5 generations of people working in the companies within management, and 4 generations are very active within the boards, and you will see those generations very soon. Only 34% of directors rate their boards as well prepared for succession planning, which means there's a significant readiness gap. If over a third, if only a third of boards really think that they are ready, you know, for succession planning. That is the result of a survey conducted amongst board members. So that tells you that even that could be a very generous score. Poor transition could lead to financial losses and governance instability. In fact, among the S&P 500 companies, market value of many of them, 8 to 15%, have dropped as a result of post-board succession failures, in which case they've lost money simply for not planning for succession, either at the non-executive level or at the executive level. So that tells you that, and these are companies that are very, very big in balance sheet, very, very big in profitability. Losing 15% of such profitability is quite significant. I'll give you a quote which talks from John Maxwell, some of you, author, good speaker, and to an extent also a preacher. Says the best leaders don't pass the torch. They kindle new flames while keeping the original fire burning. That's exactly what Alhaji Bodo was referring to when he spoke. It is not just about passing on the torch of leadership. It is also kindling new flames that will ensure that the board that you leave behind, the companies that we leave behind, are able to do significantly better than how they were when we were there. So this is a very significant quote for me. And it speaks to the level of understanding that we must bring to bear in terms of succession planning. In other words, if we do it right, we would have guaranteed the long-term sustainability of our various companies. On the other hand, if we don't do it very well, then we might actually be digging or providing a situation where we might not be able to do very well over a period of time. Today's board composition, again, of S&P company will show you that there are five generations. There's the silent generation, those who were born between 1928 and 1945. This will be 80s to 96. I'm not sure there's any here. Well, maybe one. Okay, one, but she doesn't look like it, so we can still call her a millennial, really. And then you have the baby boomers between 1946 and 1964, which would mean people between the ages of 61 and 79. Most boards that I have worked with in Nigeria in the last 30 years or so have been led by baby boomers, most boards. I mean, over time. Of course, some of the silent generation have passed on, have left those boards, but the baby boomers have stayed a little bit longer. Maybe because I'm a baby boomer myself. That's most likely the case. Then there's the Generation X, who are now between the ages of 45 and 60. And then there's the millennials, born between 1981 and 1996, that is between 29 and 44. And the Gen Zs, the very young ones, mostly your children, or sometimes too also your grandchildren, between the ages of 13 and 28. But today, most of the ones that people want to concern themselves with are the baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Generation Z, for a simple reason that, I mean, most 96-year-olds don't really want to sit on any board anyway. So really, why focus so much on them? And we'll use these four generations as a test case. As you can see, for most boards in that S&P 500, 51% are baby boomers. And by the way, baby boomers is not really about the age. Remember, it's about the time you were born. So at some point, a baby boomer was also 10 years old. At a point, a baby boomer became 25 years old. But today, they are between ages 61 and 79. And 51% of those boards are made up of baby boomers. Then you have the next generation, which is the Generation X, constituting 35%. And then you have the millennials, who are also rising, constituting 8%. Generation Z are the very young ones, and they're still relatively few on our boards. But it's not just about these figures. It's about the characteristics that each of these generations bring to our boards and how they affect the successes of our boards. So if you look at today's boardroom composition in the next slide, you will see that for the baby boomers, they come with special strengths. They have institutional knowledge because they've been there for a while, and they think strategically because they've also learned from very, very experienced people in the silent generation. Of course, a lot of us remember those who will have been called the super permanent secretaries in Nigeria today. They belong to that generation. They are very technical, very articulate people, and many of our parents or uncles belonged to that generation. So we learned quite a lot from them. Their formative experiences was pre- and post-independence years in Nigeria, and they were used to the hierarchical systems. But then they have their own downsides, typically resistant to digital transformation. On the other hand, when you look at the millennials, they are very fluent digitally. They're stakeholder focused. In terms of formative experiences, global connectivity, they have friends all over the world. So a millennial that has gone, many of them have also been schooled abroad. They have exposures because of tech explosion and the social media, friends all over the world. So right on your board in Nigeria, a millennial may be bringing international perspectives to bear that even you, that is a 70-year-old or 65-year-old, has never experienced, simply because of global connectivity. And I'm sure many of us have had course to train to go for one course or the other in Oxford, in Harvard, in Stanford. And you know how passionate they try to create that cohort system which is to turn us into internationals, particularly the baby boomers, because not many of us had the opportunity of experiencing that international connectivity, simply because at the time many of us grew up, the University of Ife that I went to was just good enough. The ABU was fantastic. UI was great. There was really no need for you to go on that adventure. Those who did for masters and whatever was by choice, not in this case when really is forced onto you. But the advantage for the millennials is that it gives them international connectivity instantly. Of course, they are also perceived to be entitled. That's a negative. And then for the Generation X, which is in between the two, they are pragmatic, they are very volatile economically, and then sometimes they think they are overlooked for strategic roles. Now, why are these important? It's because it points to the strength that each of these members of your board, depending on the generation they are, will bring to your board. And what a wise board needs to do is to be able to harness those strengths, identify them, and find suitable candidates that will fill those gaps. For instance, if you look at a typical board, I mean, you are concerned about risk management in the typical board. You are concerned about technological innovation. You are concerned about culture. You are concerned about stakeholder engagement. Now, each of those generations brings special skills to those very important functions of a board. For instance, in terms of risk assessment, a baby boomer is naturally conservative. So they prioritize financial stability of the company. They focus on proven risk, so they don't want to take too much of risk. And they are sometimes skeptical about emerging risk, e.g. cyber. On the other hand, when you look at a millennial, in terms of technology, they push for artificial intelligence, cloud solutions, digital first mindset. Do you need those things in a board that wants to sustain itself? Certainly, yes. Do you also need to have people who can sort of draw the rein when we are going too fast in terms of the baby boomers? Certainly, yes also. The same thing goes for culture. I mean, for the baby boomers or the Gen X's, they support meritocracy, whereas for the Gen Z's, really, they just want to prioritize mental health and they demand inclusivity. They want everybody to be collegial. They don't want one big man taking all the decisions. They want you to discuss it with them at every point in time. And many times when you don't, I'm sure we have all seen that revolt sometimes in some of amongst our management, because they just want to be part of it. Now, what does that also mean? It means that there is some benefits to that inclusiveness. Certainly, there's a lot of benefit to the technology adoption characteristics of millennials and even of the Gen Zs, who are quite innovative, who will champion AI, blockchain, the kind of things that a silent generation member is not particularly interested in. But those things are also good for the board of a company. So it means that having a mix that is deliberately planned, well orchestrated, and well implemented can only be to the benefit and long-term sustainability of a board. Now we can go on and talk about some of the hidden costs of not recognizing these issues. So like I said, it's very important to recognize the differences in the generation in terms of attributes, in terms of qualities, in terms of characteristics of those different generations. But there's also the problem with not recognizing them, which are the costs. Now, a survey by the Federal Reserve Bank in New York shows that stock price volatility increases by 12 to 15% during unplanned transitions. In other words, boards that have not planned their succession very well, looking at these various categories of generations. There's also a 40% reduction in implementation of strategic initiatives when suddenly you don't have effective transition from generation to generation. There's a 24-month recovery period for stakeholder confidence. In other words, people have lost confidence because of some negative news, some wrong decisions, and it takes sometimes more than 2 years for you to be able to recover from such errors. And then 65%, that was amazing for me, 65% of institutional investors in SRP companies cite succession concerns as reason for divestment. And succession is not just talking about the non-executive board members. It's also talking about CEOs and executive directors of companies. So succession is not just about passing the baton. Remember, it is not, it will rekindle the flame so that you can continue to have the church for a longer period of time. If it is from passing from a 62-year to another 63-year all the time, you are going to miss all the benefits that you will get from the millennials. You're going to miss all the benefits that you will get from the Gen Zs. So it is very important for us as directors to recognize that we must go beyond just succession. We must ensure that the succession encourages diversity. And here we are talking about diversity in generation and age. Of course, there are other diversity, gender and geographies and all of that. But today, it's really focusing about age and in particular about generations, because the generations have different behavioral patterns, each of which is useful to a board. Now, there are other things that are beyond financial impact. One is institutional knowledge gap. So if we leave all our board members to be the age of 64, 65, 75, and someday they will have to leave. When they leave, then you struggle with institutional memory, institutional knowledge retention. Then also is relationship capital. Many boards, particularly boards that are dominated by the boomers, we are relationship based because many of us grew up, relating very well from primary school, keeping our friendships, and we were not the tech age where people date each other now. You wrote letters, you visited. I can see Banji is remembering what he used to go through. You did all of that. So we are animals of relationship, and you can see it with most baby boomers. But it's not the same case with the Gen Zs. So how do you ensure also that you don't lose relationships? So it means you must bring them into your board early enough for them to cultivate those relationships, nurture them, so that when you are not there anymore, you don't lose those relationships. And in many businesses, just like in my own business of banking, or more appropriately investment banking, people only trust you. People only allow you to handle their wealth when they trust you. That is, they must have a relationship with you. And it is like that in many other businesses too. People don't have lawyers or accountants that they don't trust. So it's important for us to recognize that. There's also strategic momentum disruption if suddenly all the 70-year-olds have to leave your board. Then all the strategies that you are implementing will be slowed down. There's culture fragmentation. If 60% of your board have to retire, and the other replacements are people that have not been with you for a very long time. And that can lead to a dysfunctional board during a extended transition period. One case that I would like to point our attention to is the Boeing's board succession failure. You remember the air crash that they had, the 737 MAX crashes, Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines, that killed 346 people, and that led to the grounding of many of their aircraft. The board then was heavily led by baby boomers. Average age at that time 64, and the outcome of the review was that they failed to address safety concerns, overlooking critical engineering and safety data. For younger people, they're quite data focused. Sometimes the older you get, the more you tend to rely on your experiences and your hunches. But for the younger people, they're quite focused on data. And I think this was a miss on the part of Boeing. The board at that time also lacked younger successors, and therefore still appointed another baby boomer to succeed the MD that had just been kicked out. And that was a missed opportunity to bring in fresh ideas to tackle safety and innovation gaps. The board turnover was quite minimal. Only one new director added, a Gen X, despite calls for diversity, according to a PwC report. And do you know what happened? Their stock value diminished by 50%. That's a lot of money to lose for just not planning well for your succession, for a company of that size. So it's important for us that we must always have that at the back of our mind. And the board was criticized for slow response to safety and cultural issues, which tend to be the kind of things that the younger people, the millennials, the Gen Zs, are quite passionate about. Now, I haven't talked about that unfortunate incident. What do we need to do as directors? There are two approaches. One is to first look at succession strategies from the perspective of what most boards, again, most boards today adopt, which is traditional model, okay, as against a dynamic model. So what will be the characteristics of a traditional model? One, you tend to do your succession planning sequentially. So there are 7 members of the board. And then we say, okay, Alhaji XYZ will be 75 next year. So let's start looking for a successor for him. You succeed in getting one. You brought in one new person. And then he goes. Then maybe in another 4 or 5 years, somebody else needs to transition from the board. You go and find another person again. It's sequential. But the dynamic model says you should have overlapping transitions. As you are planning for succession between Generation X and the baby boomers, you must also be planning for succession between the Gen Zs and the millennials. And you must be planning for succession between the millennials and the Generation X. So that at every point in time, you are turning over the board. Fresh ideas are coming in. New behaviors are coming in, and people are learning from those who have been there longer. Like I said, it will enhance knowledge transfer at points of handover. So if you brought in, for instance, a Generation Z, even though I know that's quite difficult for many of us to bring in 25-year-olds to your boards, I can see some heads are saying no to me here. And I quite understand that. I also find it a bit challenging. But then it's something we must think about. Even if you don't want to do Gen Zs, please, it's very important to look at the millennials because they are the future. And all the things you need to make a company grow and to succeed in the emerging world, they are the ones that are native to those things. So part of the dynamic model is that you must also have continuous knowledge transfer. So it's not just transfer at the point of handing over from a 75 that is year-old retiring and a younger person taking over. So it must be continuous. And we must focus on the evolution of the entire board as a system, not on the replacement of individuals, which is the sequential approach. So it's important that you must have a deliberate generational diversity in board composition, absolutely necessary. And we must also ensure mentoring flows in multiple directions. What I mean by that is this. So if Alhaji Mohammed Rufai is on a board and is asked to mentor a 45-year-old or a 43-year-old, certainly he has a lot to teach that 43-year-old in terms of governance, in terms of financial prudency, in terms of relationship management, and so on and so forth. But I dare say that Alhaji will have to learn from that 43-year-old about artificial intelligence, about technology transformation, because that is just the way they are trained to think. So it is mentoring in both directions that we must be talking about. And that speaks also to the issue of knowledge transfer, not just from the traditional to the younger, but also from the younger to the older. That is more fulfilling for most boards. Institutional knowledge will be systematically preserved. So you won't need to sit down because 2 directors are leaving the board and have to spend 1 week, 2 weeks coaching, because over time, decisional knowledge has been transferred. And also, governance evolution will become balanced with continuity, and succession planning is an ongoing process. Should not be event triggered. Should be something that we are constantly thinking about and constantly working on. Next slide. The other thing I would like to talk about also on these strategies for multigenerational continuity is, I had mentioned overlapping transition models, which is very important. Very important that the retirements must be staggered so that you can blend traditions, generations. Then succession depth. We must very much be conscious of developing Gen Z, Gen X's, and millennials simultaneously, because one will still succeed the other. At some point, the Gen X's will become what we are. We are the people that are going to live. So you must constantly, ensure that you do that. Knowledge transfer, as I mentioned, must be structured mentorship, and there must be one that is multi-directional, or at least two-directional. Then the bi-directional mentoring, as I said, there is a traditional, boomers mentoring Gen X's, and the reverse, which is the millennials and Gen Z's, training boomers on digital trends and the things that we know less about. Of course, governance structures, which is really the game of boomers, who are mostly the controllers of boards today. We will also be able to teach them that. I will soon round off so that I won't delay you from your lunch. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, from strategy to practice. So we've talked about the importance of all this. We've talked about why we must do them. The question is, how do we do them? How do we do them? And we'll talk about a framework, but generally speaking, you must carry out an assessment. Audit your board composition using that generation diversity matrix that I talked about earlier on. We must also identify our diversity objectives. We must create transition timelines. We must be clear in our mind and have individual plans for the chair, for the committee leaders, or from those other generations that we talked about earlier. And then you must create onboarding processes for them. Pair new directors with boomer mentors. That is, pair could be at the committee level, it could be at a hard dog committee level, it could even be a special assignment from the board. Let a boomer, the 65-year-old, be paired with the 40-year-old. That way, you are able to achieve that two-directional training. So one is training the other on the skills we know how to do very well, while we're also learning the skills that they have naturally, that they naturally have better than ourselves. Then we must create a feedback mechanism, carry out annual surveys that you can do internally. You can engage those who know how to do it very well to carry out surveys for you to gauge the transition success. And of course, we must communicate it. Transparent updates to your shareholders and to other stakeholders. Another very important tool and framework is the bi-directional mentoring we talked about earlier on. So for the traditional director, our governance processes, we know them. We know the rules, we know the policies, because that is the way we are trained, to live by the rules and the policies. So we must be in a position to pass it on to the other generation. The stakeholder engagement, very good. Crisis management, very good at it. Retrospection, those are qualities that you find in the traditional board. But then there must also be the reverse mentoring, digital transformation, consumer behavior shift, very important, emerging market trends, technology integration that we get from the Generation X and the millennials. The other way to ensure that we do this effectively is through our meetings, meeting structures, and generational integration. Like someone would say, pre-meeting preparation guides, very important. So for instance, if a chairman wants to start mentoring a 40-year-old, nothing wrong, and I have done that a couple, and I'm sure a lot of us have done that. You invite the younger person. Of course, you've got your pocket book of the things you want on your agenda written down, somehow in your file, and you ask the person, what do you think? What are the things that you think are very topical that we should be talking about, maybe at this strategy session, or that you like to think about infusing into the board agenda, you may be surprised that 80-90% of the things you are thinking about are the same thing that that person is thinking about. But what does that say to you? It means that he or she is getting ready. And it also means that you're going to be able to develop the confidence level of that individual in terms of preparation of board materials. Then there should be cross-generational agenda setting. So whatever we want to do, let's not just be top down all the time. Sometimes somebody must take charge, no doubt about that. But then it helps a lot too, particularly when we recognize these differences in the behavioral patterns of the generations. So take ideas from the Generation X and the millennials, particularly the millennials, very, very important because of their new approaches to life. Then, of course, that helps us to also carry out some role rotation to prevent generational clustering. For instance, if you have a technology committee in a board, most likely the tendency is to have the younger people who are more comfortable with technology. But I would say that is wrong. Some will argue that is wrong. You can have that, but you must have a mix of them. Otherwise, the older people will also not learn so much about technology. So we must avoid clustering in whatever structures we put in place. Another case study, which probably will be the last, will be the IBM multi-generational board transition. They did this well. They had an aging board that lacked digital fluency, and they were running the risk of losing cloud market share. So at that time in 2018, the IBM had an average age of 63, and they were facing pressure from the market on cloud and AI businesses. So what did they do? They appointed 2 Generation X directors, ages 48 and 52, with tech background, and they established a diversity and inclusion leadership council, which paired boomer directors with millennials for reverse mentoring. And in 2021, they added another millennial, and guess what? That led to a stock rise of 20% between 2020 and 2022. Unlike our own market, every dollar stock rise, every percentage stock rise means such a huge sum in terms of capitalization in some other developed markets. So 20% increase, it's not a joke, just simply for getting it right in terms of succession. Another case study, the final one, is the Ford family. Of course, Bill Ford Jr. at age 53 became chairman of the board, and then the family controls 40% of the company. But at some point, the family governance council was formed to prepare Gen X successors. And in doing so, they found first a 63-year-old, but gradually added a Gen X who was 49, and later on another 58-year-old. And today, as a result of these outcomes, they have sustained 6% of US market share. They've piloted their EV vehicle, and there's a 10% increase in the investor confidence. So whereas it's a family business with governing council that is family-centric, but at a point you realize that it's important for them to also open up, bring in people with different experiences of different generations and different backgrounds in order to be able to guarantee the future of the company. And just before rounding off, I would like to say all of this must also be time activated. It's not enough to talk about them. If you really want to achieve them, it's also important to put them in the context of time. Typically, people will say you can plan and commence the implementation over a 180-day period. It's a long journey. As you said, it's dynamic, but you must be focused of ensuring that the planning is put in place. And so you have a day 1 plan. Day 1 to 60 can be for the assessment of the things you need to do. You must assess where you lack the skills and find where we can, sort of fill the gaps. And then we can do a design, and then, of course, we can commence implementation. If somebody will please go on to the last slide. I've talked about, yes. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, let's say there's some benefits to creating a board or boards that have multi-generation. It is considered not the best to have a predominance of one generation or the other on any board. Even for a fintech board, there's some advantage of having the Gen Zs and maybe some Generation X and some millennials, because we all have a lot to learn from each other. And what are those key insights? Multi-generational boards enhance innovation and resilience. The board is certainly going to be more resilient. Strategic succession preserves knowledge and stability. Knowledge, stability, relationship management. Secondly, there's the age diverse boards tend to outperform peers by between 5 and 10%. That is, boards that have people from the various generations we identified tend to do better. There are long-term benefits that also go with it. There's stronger stakeholder trust, and there's sustained growth. And finally, we must begin to compose these boards, and we must adopt the mentorship programs that are required, not just for the younger ones, I repeat, but also for ourselves. And you can only do that when we are all together on some board. I recognize that traditionally, some boards tend to belong or to be led by the baby boomers. And most boards in Nigeria are like that also, not just the S&P. And that's also because of the history of those boards. But we need to make a conscious effort to bring in younger people. And it's not an easy task. Even the man standing there, I'm not sure he has succeeded in doing that. But the one thing I know I must do for the long-term sustainability of the Greens group is to ensure we look at all of that and bring in new generations. I want to thank you for listening to me, and I do hope that I have not bored you too much today. It's really been a wonderful experience to be with everybody. Thank you.
I think our guest speaker actually deserves another and a better round of applause. It's all about corporate governance, and he has gone one step further to tell us how effective and efficient we will be if we plan our boards well and have multi-generational inclusion. Past President, please make welcome Chief Mrs. Eniola Fadayomi, DFIOD. Thank you very much, ma'am. We do appreciate your being here. It is now time for us to have an interactive session with regard to the paper that has just been presented. So this is where we hear from those who are here, haven't listened. So if you have any comments, any questions, yes, please. So do tell us your name and please go straight to the point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bankole Bernard. And thank you very much, Mr. CIoD Follower, for a wonderful presentation. Yes, you have spoken so well about multi-generational leadership in the boardroom, which is quite interesting. But I will appreciate this to our immediate environment where these appear more as a textbook approach to things rather than the reality that we have on ground. Let me let me use myself as an instance. The first thing I want to focus on when talking about the board is the value that the board proposes to my business, as it were, not putting into consideration aspect that you have spoken about. So at what point do we move to this multi-generational leadership when the board is still struggling to find its bearing in the business place? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you? Yes, do we have anyone else? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Patricia Ifewulu. I'm the company secretary of Continental Insurance PLC. And thank you very much, sir, for that insightful presentation. Diversity from the perspective of age, because when we talk about diversity, we're looking at gender, and that is what the Company and Allied Matters Act focuses on. But there's been an argument about bringing millennials, or maybe even Generation X, onto board because of time constraint. Boomers sometimes are retirees. I know you're not retired yet, but some of them are. But millennials, Generation Z, are still in the workforce. And there is this issue of time. Some of them are executive in their organization. Will they be able to give that time, be able to make themselves available whilst addressing their executive roles in their primary organization, still have time to serve as non-executive directors on the boards of other companies? I'd like to hear your perspective and thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will they have the time? Yes, just right here.
Thank you very much. And very wonderful delivery, very insightful. I do think that it is something that every organization should be talking about at this time. And it is very, very critical. Mine is a comment. And I know that you have all that it takes to answer to the first two questions, because it's just very doable. It is practical, it is doable, it's realistic. So I just want to make a comment relative to making it happen. How are we able to achieve multi-generational leadership, especially with the board level? We do know in today's reality that a lot of millennials and Gen Zs are entrepreneurs. They are focused on building businesses, so a good number of them have actually accumulated significant experiences in the marketplace that they can infuse and bring to any board, whatsoever the board type is. But what I would like to mention and highlight also to people who are looking to adopt these principles is that in our peculiarity across the continent, especially with regards to Africa, the culture is also in a way that older and established people oftentimes do not know where to draw the lines and bring respect to the table. And so that when you start to hammer on the respect, then you lose the value you want to bring from the young people. I say that because realistically, you find in an organization where you've got a baby boomer, you've got a Gen X, then you've got Gen Z, you've got millennials. And you can see the way that they struggle, because in some organizations, they don't even let the young people have a voice because director is 60 years old or 55 and all of that. But if you really want innovation to thrive and you really want success out of this, you must first of all unbundle the age and understand that every single person who is in the organization has come with value. Give them the opportunity to have voice, have the confidence to be able to air the opinions and really stimulate the innovation that is required. So my name is Dr. Chizo Malize. I'm the Managing Director of FITC. And in FITC where I work, we have a whole crop of innovative team that we call the Catalyst. All of them are 25 years old. And they are doing great things from the organization, from bottom up. So at the boards, give them visibility, give them voice, give them the authority and opportunity to have a voice. So we do not also inhibit them from the mentality of Africa, where respect is what is important and where they cannot be seen and they cannot be heard and just seen. Just information that can help us execute successfully. Thank you.
And the commercial department will be presenting a bill for advertisement very shortly.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Mr. Fallow for a very thought-provoking presentation. My name is Taba Peterside. I run a microfinance lender called Waveline Growth Partners, and I just want to, it's a practical example of what he said, because we are just a board of baby boomers. But I have one millennial on my board, and she has been extremely helpful. You know, some of the points he made about what are their own strengths, how can we use technology. And she's also an entrepreneur. So to the issue of time, you can start. She's an entrepreneur, so she has flexibility. She runs a business which is international. She's based in global. She's been able to give us some experience, been able to connect us with fintechs, and has really actually going to help bottom line. So I just want to say that it is it's very doable, and I'm reaping the benefits of a millennial on my own board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to hand over the microphone to our guest speaker. Well, sir, I did warn you, sir, that people were waiting.
That's fine. And I've been helped by Taba and Chioma. You know, the points they made are very valid. Experience has shown that when you have diversity in your board, I mean, we're human. There are some things we know so well, but there are some things we know very little about. But because we have all been in the polar position all our life, maybe last 20 years, 25 years, there's a tendency to think that we know much more, you know, of everything. But that is not true. You would get the benefit, in my own view, you get the benefit of bringing knowledge that you don't have, not because you are not brilliant. It's probably just because of the generation in which you grew up. The way that a Gen Z or millennial thinks is radically different. And those differences are the things that will bring the spark to a board. Chioma, you're absolutely correct. I hope I'm not going to be accused of advertising for you too, but I know you are doing a great job in FITC with all those young people. You train our people, some of our graduate training things, and I see what comes out of that initiative, which means that something must be right. I mean, I'm not so sure if we would still not get the good quality you are providing if every facilitator you have there is a 63-year-old like myself. I'm not so sure whether you still get all of that. But I think that diversity brings something to the board, just like Taba has also acknowledged. Bernard, my friend, I think that we must be able to find the time to create the future. Okay, so while we are chasing the present, it's very important. I mean, you must survive today to be able to be in the future. And I understand what you mean by, look, we want to survive first. Who wants to bother about this? But you know, some of the younger people may also bring values that you have never thought of. You know, we sometimes tend to think that the relationships and the things that we bring to the table are the only things that get the work done. Not so. Particularly in the world that we have transitioned to, where technology, artificial intelligence, where we, the baby boomers, are less skilled at. And that is the play of tomorrow. Even it has become the play of today, quite frankly. So if you really must create that kind of continuity in the company, we must make a conscious effort. And in terms of finding the candidates, you can also groom the candidates. For instance, in our companies, we tend to have some of the younger people starting from the subsidiaries. And you will easily see those who have stars there. I'm talking about non-executive directors. And well, they are not Gen Zs, let me confess. They are not Gen Z 28-year-olds. I can see one of them around here at least. Let me not mention his name. Who have also now become very experienced, very mature board members that I will feel confident someday to say, look, you can just carry on and be the group chairman, because they've gone through a transition process with that board. So sometimes we must be ready to do the work. So it does not mean that they must all start by being the chairman of the board. No. They can start through your subsidiary. They can also start from executives. Remember that a board is not just made up of NEDs. They are also the executives. But a board that is made up of 60 to 70-year-olds and has a 65-year-old managing director, really, are you going to get any spark in that board? It's not very likely. But if you have some of the younger people also in your executive position, and yeah, they will make their mistakes. That is the way. We have also made our mistakes in the past, by the way. I'm sure many of us, including myself. But today, well, we thank God that we've learned our lessons. And for you to sustain a board, that's the kind of thing we must do. So there's the executive track, there's the subsidiary track, there's committee leadership track. So many opportunities for them to also learn. And then you must also be ready to handle them and group them for the future sustainability of the company. I hope that helps a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And of course, Chizo, that was just a joke. So I do understand that. Sir. On second thoughts, it was not a joke. The commercial department will be getting in touch with you. When the president and chairman of governing council has spoken. Thank you very much. I do understand that we would have time for just a few more before we go to lunch. I saw a hand right here before the... Yes, sir. Sir, I do crave your indulgence. He came in, I think he was one of the very first people to come in. Can I have him speak first and give him a round of applause? The elder came in very early, and I think he deserves that commendation and recognition.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I wish to congratulate the guest speaker. I think he's spoken well. And the need for diversity in our boards cannot be overstated. I have led boards for more than close to 30 years, mostly as chairman. But I can say that there are challenges when you have a diverse board, as we are being told now. Because my experience is that a lot of the younger people who come into the boards, sometimes they come with different values. Values that probably we are not traditional to the companies. And the issue of relationships is very important. There are cases where the success of the business depends to a large extent on old relationships. And a lot of the younger ones do not seem to come with that skill and all that. So I think it's a challenge. Okay? It's necessary, but it comes with its challenges as well. Thank you.
Well, I'm Dr. Fred Odutola, former CEO of the Bible Society of Nigeria, presently a lawyer, and an arbitrator. 2 ways. I remember when I was new at a board, Africa Area Board. And in Nairobi, Kenya, we had a man who was the chairman of the board from Cameroon. And he would look at the young people and say, what are all these young people doing here? So politely at the lunch, I said, sir, if you don't want to deal with the young people, go to where the elders are, they are in heaven. And from that moment, he never made that comment again. Because we had young people, high-tech people, and they were really adding value. And I was learning from them too as a young leader myself. But the man would always like, after that one, he stopped it completely. Because I told him where the elders are, they are in heaven. So if you can't deal with these young people, go to where the elders are. And it's very important that we must be open. On a serious note, until we learn as leaders that leadership and followership are interchangeable, we won't make headway in life. My granddaughter was teaching me how to operate their TV in Missouri. At that moment, she was the leader, I was the follower. And I think with that spirit, we can make things happen. So young people, come up strong. We are getting older, we are fading out. So we'll give you all the support. Thank you.
While waiting for the next speaker, I just want to acknowledge the support we received from Polaris Bank, Intercontinental Distillers Limited, Offshore Marine, Energia Limited, FSL, and Coronation. Please give them a round of applause for the support. And I'm sure the host will agree with me that this support is something that we truly, truly appreciate. Next question or comment.
Okay. Good afternoon. I believe we hear from the baby boomers. I will also hear from the Generation X. I think it's time to hear from the millenniums. So I have a question. So my name is Odion from FSL. So how can board prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in succession planning and board composition? That's my first question. So second question is, what are the essential skills and quality to look for when selecting new board member on succession planning? Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much. I believe that is the last question or comment that we will take. The guest speaker will respond and we'll take a break for lunch. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start from the comments made by Dr. Odutola. You're absolutely correct that it is something that we just have to work on. And when you think about it, for as long as I've known Actor Awagu, I've known him to be at the top, not just as an architect, whether it's in MBCC or Nigerian American or in the CIoD. I'm sure you became president of CIoD or one of those ones 15, 20 years ago. I'm at least one of them. So the question is, how old were we then? That's one example. Mine is an example. When I joined, was it just at the beginning of Yaradua's government, or when I got appointed to the National Council on Privatization? That was how many years ago? So if the nation could find then a young man at that time, I didn't even quite think I was that young, because I would have been maybe late 30s or early 40s or whatever, yes, at that time. So why can't a 45-year-old be on our corporate board today? Even be at polar position in our corporate board. Even less than that. So I thank you very much for that observation that we must be ready to let it happen. And that speaks to also the first speaker. I agree with you, sir. Some of the younger people come with a lot of value erosion, the things we are used to. But again, that's the work we've got to do. That's the work we've got to do. I can use myself as an example. There's nothing wrong in doing that. One very good member of this institute, who is late now, sorry, Memotosho, was my chairman in Greenwich. And when we invited him specially to come and chair Greenwich, he said to me, there are some things I don't want you to do. The day you do them, I leave your board. And once in a while, when I forgot, he actually told me he's leaving. We had to say, sorry, sir, I will never do so again. Which means that training will always get us there. Just as we had received training from people, it is our duty to also train those that will succeed us. If the values are that bad, obviously you don't need such people on your board. So that will have to do with the selection process. If the selection process is good, you would have people that have generally good values. They may be lacking in some things like relationship management, like you mentioned, sir. Then it will be our duty to mentor them through that process. Bring them to places like this. They meet some of our friends, our former associates and good colleagues, and gradually they will develop it. But we must know that it is work that we have to do as a board. They don't fall from heaven. Even today, to hire people now, it's a lot of work. I'm sure we all go through that. So you have to nurture and mentor people. So I thought you were more like a Gen Z. You are really a millennial. Okay. You look younger. A smart one too. You must coming from the stock of FCL, so I can understand that. Diversity, inclusiveness, DEI, very important. I think for most boards, it's already written in their policies. For most boards, you have it in the policy. In fact, for regulated boards, whether it's banking, insurance, you are required to have all those things. What is remaining is how to implement them. Some of the things we talked about today are the processes you go through in implementing them. And it is the duty of the board through its governance committee to ensure that we implement those things. But if you look at, most likely your company, which I know is self-regulated, must have that as one of its policies. Same thing with us. But sometimes people take the policies as just something to fulfill righteousness. But if we take it as a mantra to implement, then we'll be able to achieve some of those. I think your question had a second part, which is, pardon? The characteristics for the boards. Oh yes, I mean, we talked about value. Value is very important. Value can be measured in terms of integrity, in terms of your work ethics, in terms of your belief systems. Very important. And for me, that will be the first thing. Is there an alignment in the value of this individual with the values of the organization? And you can break it down into financial prudence, integrity, work ethics, and so on and so forth. Once there's that alignment, all those various elements, those are the things you want to look for first. Second is, of course, the capacity. Sometimes people have all the values, but may not have the attributes that are required to do the job. I mean, for you to be a very good board member, you must be somebody who loves to read, because to come to an insurance company's board meeting or a bank's board meeting or a telco's board meeting, you've got a pile of documents to read over a very short period of time. So if the person is really somebody who is not known to be interested in reading books or reading anything, might not be a perfect fit for a board. Must also be somebody that has a capacity to do the work. Most board members really burn the midnight oil to be able to implement their duties as board members. So those are some of the qualities I will look for. But I would say first is value broken down into various elements of it. Your character, your integrity, your capacity, and so on and so forth. I hope that helps a bit. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I did say that would be the last, but I am told that the only constant in life is change. So we will be taking one comment, but please would crave your indulgence to make it short because we have actually gone way beyond the time we're supposed to spend. I did inform you, I did warn you, sir, that your paper presentation, it has been one that people have been looking forward to. So, sir, could you please just make it short so that we can go on? I understand that the lunch is getting cold. Thank you.
Hello? Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. We can hear you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to raise my issues. My name is Joseph Salsa, immediate past chairman on Abuja Zone. Sorry that I'm not able to come physically because of logistic reasons, but I really appreciate the speaker for the insightful presentation. I just want to ask one question. How do we manage this diversity, especially this generational diversity, especially where the old men with this adage that what an old man see sitting down, a young man cannot see when he's standing up. And the conflict here is that the Gen Z or the millennial will always tell you that what using technology they can see, an old man with his experience cannot see. So how do we manage that? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's actually a good note to to conclude the interactive session.
Yes, I quite agree with you. I'm one of those people that used to see that. I still say it, that what I can see just sitting down, you have to, that's more or less saying that experience is very, very important. And we say that sometimes also to drive home the point to the younger people that please listen a little bit to what we have to say, okay? But it's also true that technology can see far, far beyond any old man. That is the truth of the matter. I mean, we all know that today. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but I would just say that it is something we must continue to manage. We must be open-minded about it, particularly ourselves, the baby boomers and the Generation X. We must be very open about it and come to terms with the fact that we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of knowledge, but there are things we don't know. And those things we can only learn from those who are younger than us. When we learn those things, our boards will become stronger and more successful boards. Thank you very much.
On that note, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that it is now time for lunch. And of course, that will be plated service. It's already been done. I also wish to again introduce myself for those who didn't come in early. My name is Akin Shemowo. I am known as the Compare Beyond Compare, and it is my great honor and pleasure to always be in the midst of distinguished gentlemen and ladies. I have to introduce myself. Thank you very much. Lunch is served. Music, please.
As introduced, my name is Dele Alimi, and my job is simple, just to say thank you to every one of us here. But as usual, we need to especially recognize and appreciate some organizations and people who have made this a success. And I'll start by showing our gratitude to our sponsors who have supported us tremendously to ensure that this is a very successful event. I want to start with Polaris Bank. We thank you very much. Intercontinental Distillers Limited, thank you very much. AB Offshore Marine, we appreciate you. Energia Limited, we're grateful. FSL Finance Limited, we thank you. And of course, Coronation. These 6 organizations have made sure that we are all able to have a wonderful time here today. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if your hands are not too busy, Can you please give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much. So as I stand there to say thank you, I want to say that in choosing our guest speaker, we were quite deliberate. Deliberate in the sense that we also noted what he has been doing in the corporate world and the evolution of the greenish holding that he heads. How he has been able to manage to some successful extent the transition and the inclusion on that board. So I'm not surprised that we got a lecture today that will definitely help us in reshaping the transition in our various boards. And in recognition of some of the issues that he has raised there today, the Institute, I think about 8 years ago now, during the tenure of Alhaji Ahmed Rufai Mohammed, started what we refer to as the Young Directors Forum. The Young Directors Forum was thereafter launched, I think, during the tenure of Chief Chris Okunowo, and it started work. And I'm happy to note that today we have over 200 young entrepreneurs, young Nigerians who have joined the Institute Young Directors Forum, and that forum is growing. Last year, the Institute also launched its mentorship program. The mentorship program is not just focused at Young Directors Forum, it is also looking at directors that are new to the board, irrespective of age, who need mentoring. And we are starting this program to help them to work with more experienced directors so that we can help them to manage that transition that Mr. Follower spoke with us about today. So we have seen the future, and we are trying to also, as an institute, put something in place, not just to mount our commitment to corporate governance, but to also put our money where our mouth is, as far as corporate governance is concerned, and as far as transition and succession is concerned. Please, a round of applause for the Institute. And I stand there today to say, well, I'm sure that one way or the other, we have also successfully done at the political level very successful and seamless transitions in our presidency, in our council elections. And I was whispering to the first vice president that maybe the next thing we'll do now, after listening to Mr. Follower, is also looking at the criteria for fellowship, for council election into the institute, and see how we can bring in younger people. For now, you have to be a fellow. It doesn't have to stay that way forever. We look at how that young people can be brought into the governing council to broaden the outlook of our governing council. So please, this will be one of my parting shots, and I'm sure those who understand that. But the truth of the matter is that the institute is also evolving. Even at the level of the executive, we are transiting. And today I'm here as an outgoing Director General. And my successor is also here, looking at what we are doing and also learning from what we are doing. So that is part of what we are doing. And my successor is much younger than I am. Much younger than I am. So we are doing our best to make sure it works. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a very big thank you to Mr. CIoD Follower. We thank you very much for the wonderful way you have addressed this theme beyond my own imagination. I thank you very much. I think it's been a lecture in transition on the board. Thank you very much. We look forward. You see, the thing about us is that we are Oliver Twist in the Institute. When we call you and you come in, our maxim is a good work deserves more work. So we are going to be giving you more work. You are going to be getting more of our invitation. So please be ready. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our guest speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I would also like to say thank you to our leaders and elders. And I'll start with our past president. I'm not surprised that some of them have left already. I think that is understandable. But the host has not left because he knows he has no choice but to be here. So I want to say thank you to our past president, who is also our host, and the chairman of the Fellows and Awards Committee of the Institute, Alhaji Ahmed Rufai Mohammed, distinguished fellow of the Institute. Thank you very much. When I'm talking with my colleague, I call him the father of the new or the modern IOD. He understands it and I understand it. So many things started with you. Thank you very much. And I wish you a very safe journey back to Abuja. Thank you very much, sir. A round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen. I also want to thank our elder statesman. And when I say statesman, I hope you understand that that covers all gender. Two-time Minister of Industry in Nigeria, Chief Dr. Mrs. Onikepo Akande, CON. Thank you very much, ma. In the last 2 weeks, we have brought you out twice, and you've always answered our call. Thank you very much, ma. God continue to bless you. Thank you very much. I want to thank our governing council members, our distinguished fellows who are here. Thank you very much for making it. And of course, I will now go to the office bearers, who the chairman has acknowledged as having supported tremendously this program. And I'll start with the first vice president. Earlier on, when we were just entering the hall, somebody called him a Milokan. And of course, by the tradition of the Institute, we have a similar transition that makes him the incoming president of the Institute. Our first vice president, Otuba Adetunji. Oyubanji, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. And of course, to our chief host, the president and chairman of the governing council, Alhaji Tijani Mohammed Borodo. Thank you very much for the atmosphere, for the environment that makes us thrive. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the committee, the Fellows and Awards Committee, both past and present. Like the chairman rightly said, we had a transition just a few months ago. So this program transcends one committee. So I want to thank members of the old committee and members of the new committee for the support that made this a success. Thank you very much, everyone. And of course, to my colleagues in the secretariat, I say thank you for the very hard work you have done. Again, when you do it well, hard work, you get more work. So there's no reprieve. You have to continue doing the good work. Thank you very much, everybody, for doing the good work. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Akishemowo. Thank you very much. Of course, you will get the invoice for the advertisement you had earlier, and it's going to be a direct deduction. You understand what I mean? But thank you for a wonderful work. Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you. Yesterday, we heard that Mr. President was going to be in town, and we know what that meant in Lagos. So we were scared. Will people be able to come out for this event? But we were able to start at exactly 12 noon as planned because you are all here. So I say a very big thank you to you all, not just for coming, but for coming on time. Please, a round of applause for yourself. Thank you very much. I think I've basically thanked everybody. I want to say, I want to wish you a very wonderful afternoon. I know most of you will still go back to work. I wish you a very wonderful afternoon. I hope we have been able to take you away from getting another lunch break by giving you a sumptuous lunch. Thank you very much. Thank you. Governing council members who are here, I want to say a very big thank you, especially those of you traveled all the way from Abuja to attend this event. At your own cost, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. I want to thank everybody again, the crew, everybody online. I also say a very big thank you. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our DG, CEO, CIoD. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's been my honor and pleasure of once again being the master of ceremony for this 2025 Fellows Luncheon. I say thank you. I wish you journey mercies back to your various destinations My name again is Akin Shemowo. I'm your compare beyond compare. Thank you very much and have a lovely, lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.